All right, so we're here to talk about Vagabonds by uh, Eloghosa Osunde, who is a Nigerian writer. Let me turn off my blur. I have a physical copy of the book just because it was cheap. It was like the same price, no matter how I was getting it. So I was like, I might as well just get a physical copy of it. Um, I I was surprised. I was expecting more of a like linear story with like I thought it was gonna be like a linear story with like a bunch of characters, but it ended up being just like a short story collection
Mm,
um with like an overarching kind of like theme, which I thought was really interesting. I thought it was really nice. It definitely because I think I don't know how I guess it kind of depends on how you feel about short story collections in general. Like these short stories are like particularly short. This is not, I've read a couple short story collections this year. Um, so the vibe is always kind of like how much do you like the vibe? What are like some of your favorite stories? Um, so I guess I'll just pose that. What were some of your favorite stories and how did you like the overall vibe of the book?
mm. I think just remembering the stories, I think the ones that like impacted me the most was the one that introduces rain, is sort of like a strange metaphysical creation of the dressmaker. I think that one stood out to me. Um, it wasn't a particularly long one, but there were two guys playing Jenga. I thought that one was cute. Um, I had a lot of trouble following individual plots, and also I found the one with the devil, the like the devil spirit that like climbs into people's bodies and controls them. That one also jumped out as well. Um, that one I found kind of um that one was kind of intense because it's sort of like mind controls someone into some beating someone to death, which I thought was pretty intense. But hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
go ahead. No, finish what you're
I
saying.
was gonna say, yeah, I think yeah, I think the one with rain was my favorite one. I thought that one was just very that one was really powerful, I think. And also the last one where it was like it took me a while to realize that it was sort of like weaving everything in together. There was like this sort of like this like great concert in the last act almost, and like all of the characters that were introduced, like Gold, who was the trans girl who was introduced in like one of the later chapters, was like explaining things to people, and I was just like, oh, I'm realizing now that like because like at the time I couldn't remember everyone's name, and I like slowly started to realize that they were all characters from previous chapters, and I'm like, oh, all right. So yeah, um, and also the other one that jumped out to me was the politician that got murked by the twink bots. It was sort of the thing that the weird thing that it reminded me of was like this is a bit silly, but it reminded me a bit of like Austin Powers with like the sexy woman robots who like actually are trying to kill you. But yeah, that's that was am
Well,
I the only one who knows?
Yeah, you mean like the fembots?
Yeah, and like
Yeah, the fembots, yeah.
these ones were like skinny twinks.
Yeah.
But
Twink bots, I guess you could call them.
that was a
The
very
twink bot.
strange one. I was surprised that it was all by the same author. Or was it by the same author?
Yeah, she wrote all the stories. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised it was by the same author because that one seemed very silly to me, compared to like some of the other ones. But I guess that was like it's sort of like an anthology in that way. Um,
Yeah, it is I think yeah, it is an anthology. That's kind of what the concept it was going for, and it had like a over kind of like how you think about maybe like what's that show called? American Horror Stories with an S.
hmm.
Like how they have like a season that has like an overall theme, and then each episode is a different story, and then they kind of have like recurring characters and recurring themes. Like in this story, like a lot of the spirits were recurring throughout the stories, even and like all the characters were different, but like the
Hmm.
spirits, like the devil or the the name of like the trickster city spirit, I forgot his name. I don't know how to say. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah,
I
Echo.
don't want to.
I
I
think.
don't want to mess up the pronunciation of a lot of these words, but like
I
Echo.
listened to the audiobook. I think it's Echo, but
Okay,
hmm.
and
but
then Osun.
Sunday,
Yeah, Tsunde was the
is he
name. It's like
he's the POV character, isn't he, in those stories? Or
yeah, like the city character, I think, right?
hmm,
He's like
that's
the
what
trickster spirit.
I was trying to figure out if the story was like an Afrofuturism thing, because like in the first chapter they're talking about like programming or something like that.
So I think it takes place in present day, and so I guess it kind of is Afrofuturism. It's like Afrofuturism, mystical kind of. So it kind of
Um,
mixes
and also
Africanism with
then there's like the murderous twink bots, which sort of suggests a like slightly futuristic setting.
yeah. They talk about like apps. That one's like I think Tinder's mentioned a couple times. Um, obviously they drive in the book. Because there's a driver. Is one of the main characters from one of the stories. Is a driver who pretends to be deaf, or mute. Was it deaf or mute? I think it was mute. He pretended to be mute for the job.
Yeah,
Obviously,
mute.
not deaf. Yeah, nobody was speaking sign language, so it was mute. And that story, I think that was one of the stories that really affected me the most. I think that I was reading that and I was like, that's when I was like, oh wow, because like I think up until that point there was nothing that was like too graphic, and then until you get to that one and like he's like I don't know if he was actually eating his lover's head, but there was a suggestion that he was
Hmm.
eating his lover's head or like his lover's body in I guess the kind of porridge that they were making, and I was like, oh wow,
Yeah,
like
that story was really upsetting to read. Hmm.
yeah, I think so I think the whole concept was really interesting to me. This idea that, vagabonds are like the unwanted people. So like you have like this sort of like really really big wealth disparity in Nigeria. And then so in a city like Lagos, there's like, the poor people who are like, you know, struggling every day just to get from day to day. And then you have these people that are more associated with like, the government or like corporate or like businesses and stuff, and they have a lot of money. And then so they have like you have like this estate system where like you'll have like a rich person who has like this big estate, and then he has all these employees. It's similar in like you see this in a lot of like I guess second world countries like Nigeria, like India. I think some people consider India a third world country, but like India, um, Korea, um, where like you have like there's like a kind of not really like a middle class, or like the middle class is kind of just like people that work for upper class people, and then you have like people that that live in like bigger cities that have like regular jobs, but then a lot of the I mean there's just so many people, and then like so a lot of the people like they just work for other people. And then so I think it's something that's interesting though is that there are a lot of I find that when you read stories from a lot of other countries, they write a lot of stories about those people, whereas like I think in America, more Western countries, we don't really write as many stories from that perspective of like people that are in like the service industry.
Well, certainly with like, I think I remember just looking back at a lot of like family films, I think like mainstream family movies from like the 90s to the 2000s, the dad was almost invariably a lawyer every single time. I think they were
Yeah,
all
And well, I guess I don't know because I think that Black stories a lot of times involve characters that are um I don't know, like you would have people that work in the service industry, but not necessarily like hospitality. Like you would have like someone who, let's say they were like a nurse, or they're like a maybe like their parent is like a sanitation worker, but you don't usually have stories where the main character is a sanitation worker or the main character is a butler. Or so I think it's um interesting to have this collection of stories all about those types of characters. Um and focusing on like the queerness, because I guess in Nigeria, vagabonds is kind of like a word for like queer people. I don't
Mm,
I didn't know that in Nigeria so many people spoke English though. That was something that was interesting.
mm. I was wondering that as well, actually, whether it was just like it was a creative decision for the book to reach more people, or by using a more like globalized language, or yeah, like whether the
Mm.
characters were supposed to be speaking English in the context of the book.
I wonder if that's like I don't know, like a colonialism African thing where like
Mm,
a lot of African countries um are like they speak English as like the unifying language, and then because a lot of the different tribes have like their different languages. Like it's like that in India. Like in India, um, they have like the official language is English because of colonialism, and then like um they so they have like, depending on where you live in India, your native language would be like different. Um,
mm,
how'd you feel about the book, Andrew?
Oh yeah. This and Dear Senthuran, and I'm really hoping that I pronounced that correctly, were actually like my gateways back into like really reading books again, because I hadn't done that in a while. And I'm really glad that these two were kind of where I like started doing that again, because both were really, really interesting, fascinating reads. And yeah, like we were talking about a bit earlier, like I was with Vagabond specifically, I was trying to like specifically uh figure out for like the longest time if like there was an overarching narrative um to all the stories that were being told, or if it was more a thematic link between all of them. And by the time and yeah, slowly I started to like kind of piece together, oh, it does seem more like divided in between like these short stories with like and is a bit more, I guess, like scattered, so to speak, but with like the author returning to these characters again um, in whatever later or wherever like they choose um, to do so. The ones I found found the most fascinating to read on like a first read were and I really hope I'm pronouncing I pronounced their names correctly. Adira and Nakem's relationship was really sweet, and I really liked how both of them were able to like confide like these different parts of each other with each other and find comfort in their relationship after like a lot had happened in their lives. And also Toju and Agbon's relationship was one that stuck out to me too. This like emphasis on like really, really just being present uh in kind of the romance they had, and Toju's inability to do that was something that I also found fascinating. It was something that seemed to like be prevalent throughout the rest of the novel, and how like it kind of handled all the relationships that were being written about as well.
Yeah, I think that Eloghosa has like a really good grasp on like setting up like because the stories are like kind of short. So like she has a really good grasp of like how to like set up a really good story and then pay it off really well in like a short amount of space. So it like even though I think all the stories were like really super impactful and they told really interesting narratives. And I think that to have so many stories um in one collection that all come from like different perspectives and that they're so thematically similar, but they all have like different setups and they all have different, you know, sort of vibes. Um so you have like stories that are about like you have like stories that are about like one person who is experiencing things. You have like family dynamic stories. Like I think the one that's I think what was it called? I remember the title because it was really interesting. It was kind of let me see if I could After God, Fear Women. I thought that it was about a man that was afraid of his wife. And then so like and then you have like the stories about the market and how you have like these sort of like the theme of like Africanism and like storytelling comes through really well. Um, so I definitely agree that that story was like really impactful and romantic. So um, and I think it was interesting to juxtapose that story with some of the stories that were like really unromantic and like really they were like sexual but not like in a romantic way. Like you had like stories like the one about Johnny, the driver, and then that story, which had like this really like gripping romantic and what's the word? Uh I don't know, like attraction. Like um they have like, you know, palpable sort of emotional current to them. Whereas I think about like the story about the girl who like seduces her professor like she like that as a like to juxtapose that against that story where like you know it's very apathetic with the way that it views sex and it's like very much she's very much like using him and like using um like trying to like she's treating him like an end to a means or a means to an end not like a to a means to an end. So I think that having stories that you know juxtapose against each other was really interesting. Um, the way she had that. Also, how did you guys feel about the structure of the novel, where it's like it has like these three different sections? Did you guys take any meaning from that, or were you guys like just seeing it as like,
Was it into three sections?
oh, I guess that maybe you wouldn't have seen this if it was the audiobook, but like so like there's like stories and then like the stories are broken up
Uh,
into like
yeah,
I think
there's
like
like a framing
four
device. Or
yeah there's like let me see like one two three four five six or like yeah like six distinct sections. There's Genesis, um manual, like Genesis, manual, Half the Sky, uh, Fallen, The Bill, and Water No Get Enemy. So I thought that was I think from what I read or what I was reading from it, I think that that was something that maybe I might need to like read the stories in different sections again to like really get a grasp on like how they
how
relate.
they
'Cause I think
relate
when
to the
I
titles.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I haven't really thought about it that much yet. So I was wondering if maybe you guys had done some thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't know if it was because I just wasn't paying it, wasn't like receiving the information. But I don't think the audiobook emphasizes the divisions that much.
Well, I guess
But
maybe it's it's interesting because I don't know if I really paid that much attention to it either, which is why I said I don't really think I thought about it. I was just wondering if maybe you guys did or saw any meaning to it. Because
mm,
I don't when I read books, I don't pay much attention to like the titles of chapters. The chapters have titles because usually
mm,
people when they usually adult books they just use like a numbering system for titles for chapters, whereas like middle grade or YA books might have like a name for a chapter. Like you think about like you know those that book series by that lady by Joanne. Um she had like there were titles for the chapters in her books, or
mm,
like I just did that one because that's a middle grade book that everybody knows. But yeah, there are other some people use
yeah,
chapter names, some people don't. So I think
yeah. But
Yeah, that.
go ahead.
Oh, oh yeah, thank you. Sorry. I was trying to like kind of parse together like what um the reasoning behind, I guess, like the divisions and why they were why it was done in that way. And if I remember correctly, we're each of those chapter divisions is from the perspective of that spirit named Tatofo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Okay.
And it seemed like as I was reading it, like it was also like both like kind of thematically setting up like each section that they were leading off, and also like kind of tracing the development of Tatafo's character themselves, and how they're changing, and their relationship to that that god I'm forgetting. Let me Yeah, Echo, where and how like their feelings toward both Echo and to human beings kind of changes and develops as like I guess like they observe and
Mhm.
like kind of do whatever they're doing.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. Yeah, to think about it like as like a, because I guess those would be the, like I said, those are like the kind of the recurring characters in the stories and the recurring characters in the chapters. So I guess that does make sense that like it would. And I do remember like going through the section because those some of those chapters are not, those chapters don't have titles because I guess they're not like distinct stories. So those felt more like, 'cause I guess that makes sense that those would be like um more thematic in that sense. And then you have like some stories that are like bullet pointed. I thought was really interesting. I just thought she made a lot of really interesting um uh structural choices, I guess editing choices. Well, I don't know if maybe she made those decisions, maybe it was her editor, but did they do for the in the audiobook when they did the certain sections, could you tell that some of the sections were like listed?
They had, I think they, because the audiobook is voiced by multiple people,
Okay.
and like certain sections are consistently voiced by the one person. But so yeah, I think they did that. Hmm. What was your question exactly?
Oh, I was asking like because in let me see if I can find one as like an example. Um, okay, so at the in top, well, I guess you wouldn't even know what I was talking about, but like, oh, it's kind of washed out, but I don't know if you can see that, but like
Um,
it's like bulleted.
um,
Can you see that?
bulleted, you mean? Like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember noticing in the audiobook they would have a lot of like dot point lists.
Okay,
I know,
yeah. So I was
and,
asking.
and that definitely translates very strangely to an audiobook. I don't. Yeah, I remember that was quite jarring. They had like they'd list there was a lot of like lists. Um, yeah.
I think I felt like
So,
I saw one that was like actually like numbered.
but yeah, it doesn't read very organically into speech, I don't think. It isn't
Mm.
really, it's
So I was thinking about
just,
like how you
it's just
would
like a
how you
translation
would
issue.
yeah how you would say that like
But it sort of sounds a little bit like the book sort of like halts for a little bit and it sounds like someone giving a lecture. But
hmm.
yeah.
I think maybe those sections are supposed to kind of be like that, like where it's like kind of supposed to be
Mm.
like a lecture, and like whether it be like different things. But let's see what else. Let's see. Did you guys did this did you like think superstitiously about any of the stories that were told? Like, I don't know, are there like stories in Australia that like you don't like look under your bed or you don't tap the closet
Um,
twice or something like
I
that?
don't think so. I think Australia as like a country is very like atheist, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and also just generally being like uh generally colonized like a very colonial country. I think a lot of that sort of stuff like gets removed basically. Um you have some things, but they're sort of like they're relegated to immigrant groups coming in, bringing their cultures over, I think. But so Australia doesn't really like outside of indigenous populations and like immigrant populations that have brought their own sort of folklore over. I don't think the British colonial segment of Australia's population has anything in particular like that. But yeah, that was interesting. Like the thing where they like what they do like a straddled good morning and it's like "Ugh," and then they get transported to another dimension. I thought that was interesting and also a little bit sad because the guy was like, I don't know if I don't know if I trust my old man anymore. He's told me a lot of stuff. And yeah, I thought that was very sad because he like started to grow mistrustful and ended up paying the price for it. And I was sort of thinking, man, when you want to teach someone to be careful, you need to like figure out a list of priorities of things they need to watch out for. Because if you tell them too many things, they can't cope with it. That was my interpretation of that story. I'm like, he's like come up with all these little superstitions, and then eventually, yeah, he was like, oh yeah, someone's gonna steal your dick if you stand in a crowd at night. It's like that's a lot of stuff to watch out for.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that some cultures are like really superstitious like that. Some cultures aren't. I know that I never like was superstitious about anything like, when I was growing up. I think except for like uh my own like anxiety and kind of
Hmm.
ADHD, OCD kind of tendencies. Like I don't have OCD, but I have like certain like tendencies where like, when I walk, I don't step on like cracks or like I try to like not step on any of the
Yeah,
lines and things like that when I walk.
I have things like that, but they only exist in my own head, and I think that might just be a mental thing with me. But no, there is no cultural element to that. I'm just like, I better be polite when I'm just by myself. I'm like, I better still be a polite person in case there's like some sort of entity that observes what I'm doing. Um, And like also just like inanimate objects. I'll be like, oh, I better not be mean to this. I better not abuse this inanimate object like a chair or something like that. Like as if you observe the item has feelings, or just the space that you're in has feelings. But yeah, like I don't know anyone in my life that actually does that. I think that's just my brain being overactive.
Yeah, same here. I think a lot, pretty much all of my own personal, I guess, ticks, I guess you could call them, were kind of, I guess, like self-made, so to speak, and kind of just uh, things that I kind of just developed on my own. They weren't really things that were, I guess, like imparted to me by anyone else or by any sort of like cultural influence or anything like that. So it was, yeah, that was the part of the book that was like definitely interesting to read, despite like not being able to, I guess, like personally connect to like that part of it. But yeah, I do remember like for the longest time, like after like reading Thomas's story where like he does end up disappearing. I think like it was like if he looks under, like he goes to the underworld or something like that. Like kind of being like, oh, I really want to like see what happened after that, especially like as the book like starts like returning to like the other character again.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially when you think about, I don't know, we talk about later, but like Dear Senthuran, or like when we read books from people with people from other cultures, you get a sense that like the books that from cultures that are less monotheistic, even if they are like, even if the standard religion is like Christianity in those, in like countries like Nigeria, the standard is Christianity, there still like is a strong undercurrent of like spiritualism, where you believe about like certain spirits, or like certain things, like you don't do certain things so that certain things won't happen. And I guess in that way, I kind of did grow up kind of superstitiously. Like they'd be like, oh, don't do this because like demons will get you, or you don't. I guess Santa Claus is kind of a good example, right? You don't you gotta be good, or you won't get any presents from Santa Claus. The Tooth Fairy. We just don't think about it like
Yeah,
that because it's so
like
commercialized. So
in Australia, we don't even really do stuff like Christmas or Halloween and stuff like that. It's like even compared to America, I think Australia is definitely a nation of extreme non-believers. It's sort of like Australia, like even just like looking at like Christianity in America, it's sort of very alien to me. I see how like spiritual people in America are, and it's very like strange and confronting to me. So yeah, even like even like mainstream or like extremely popular religions are just not super. I don't think they've got a major grip in Australia. But so yeah, I don't think superstitions would have much of a chance thriving here, or at least not popular ones anyway.
that's interesting. So let's see. I don't really have any topics that I think that I think it's interesting when you have um short story collections, because like because there's because everything is so um what's the word? I think to go music terms, but everything is so um punctuated, and so succinct. That's the word I was looking for, succinct. Um, it doesn't lend itself, I think, as much to discussion, because like you're like reading a story, and like there are like stories that are like more impactful, but like for like overall, like if you're thinking about talk about like the whole book instead of like going story by story, it's interesting to think of like what are like the overall themes of the book. I think obviously, this one is, about, I think she does a good way of setting it up in this one, because it's called like Vagabonds. She gives like the definitions of like the vagabonds, and there's like she does a good she has a good sense of like prepping you, even though I didn't because I like to go into things a little more blind, so I don't really read up on what they're like about or anything like that before I read books. And I usually like, even if like a book has like a dust jacket, like this copy that I have of this book, I kind of just like skip over it because because I sometimes I feel like they give away too much, and sometimes I feel like, but this one actually gives away very little. It just basically, it's just like, I don't know. Reading the story, I can understand why, because there's not really much to give away, because there's not really like a plot, so to speak, like an overall plot. It's more like it's just about like the themes of the book, which makes sense. Like I think that it's kind of very unmainstream right now to write more speculative fiction, um like stuff that's not super plot driven. I think that a lot of stories that we read today are like really plot driven, so it was interesting to read something that was a little more abstract. I think one of the books that was kind of popular last year, that came out last year, was what was it called? How High We Go in the Dark. I In the book community, a lot of people were reading it, and it was like this short. It was a short story. Well, it's not really a short story collection. It's more like a vignettes, like kind of like this was, where like there's the stories, there's like individual stories that kind of tie together at the end, and it's like I don't really know like what you would call that even would be, like if there's like a literary. I'm sure there is a literary term for it, but like I don't know the literary term for it. I should say that I'm not an English major,
I'd
but
I'd be even more lost to that than you.
I know like some literary terms, but I'm not a literary. I'm taking like a bunch of English classes, but I'm not like a literary major or anything. I've never like done like an in-depth study of like any sort of like, you know, like literary history or anything like that, where you talk about like classifications of like different stories or things, but or like what is romance or what is a short story or what is a novel. I know what a novel is, but the fictional book, where it's like, so like a autobiography is not a novel because it's not fiction. So just a little tidbit in case you were wondering. 'Cause sometimes I used to wonder like what the difference between a book and a novel is.
Mm.
So a novel is a long form story that's fictional. A novella is a shorter version of a novel. Memoir is an autobiographical book, a or story. So yeah. So these, I think, going from that, um, to talk about Dear Senthuran, which is by Awaeke Emezi, with another Nigerian author. They are uh this I think this book, this memoir is like heavy. I mean, it's definitely like really heavy. She talks about a lot of like conceptual queerness, concepts about, you know, suicidal ideation. It's a heavy in the suicidal ideation. Heavy about like her own concept of her own gender identity and how she sort of like struggled with that throughout her life. Um,
Oh, they,
and
right?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, um, and how they, um, I, that's also an important thing because like they start out as, um, they were assigned female at birth, and they you know, talk in length about it can be the book is kind of graphic at times where she goes into how, you know, where they go into how they decided to get rid of certain like they go into how they, got a hysterectomy. They talk about their I think, well, mainly, yeah, I think mainly the hysterectomy is the biggest they talk about different surgeries in general that they don't really. I think I think the hysterectomy is like maybe the most explicit surgery they talk about, but they do talk about surgeries in general and like the concept of mutilation, and how that relates to suicidal ideation for them. And they talk about their own identity, their own sense of divinity. I thought was really interesting how they talk about, you know, I think it's kind of like religion, the way that they describe it. Like it's so like even though um like and once that clicked for me, I was like, oh, okay, this is they they see themselves kind of, I don't know, I think a lot of people would look at this as kind of like sacrilegious, especially in where the culture they come from in Nigeria. But if you think about it, it's sort of similar to how um, Christians think of themselves as descended from God. She sees herself as a descendant of a God. They see themselves as um, you know, holy in that way or divine. They have a recognition that everyone else is not as divine as them. They don't have the same. They understand that everybody doesn't have the same connection to the divine that they have. And I that this memoir is very abstract. There's definitely they definitely talk about events that happen throughout their life, but they don't necessarily go into, it's not necessarily structured by the event. It's more like them talking about their it's more like lamentative where they go into detail about how, they like different things that they different topics. And so it's kind of like a essay collection, I would say, in that way, which I thought was really interesting. It reminded me a lot of Audre Lorde's work, um, her prose, which is it's poetic at times. I thought it was really impactful, like super impactful to me. Like I I mean I was just writing like different thoughts that I was having while I was reading it. So I'd be interested to see hear what you thought about it in general, Andrew.
Well, yeah, I also really, really love this memoir, and and yeah, as a side note, like my major is film, and this was the book that kind of like actually like really started motivating me to like write my own stuff again, which is also just kind of really nice, but um, but yeah, like so much they obviously go over so many different like aspects of their own life, and I connected to a lot of like or found like inspiration in like a lot of how they were like talking about their views on like on writing, on their own, on work in general, on relationships, and all these different like aspects of their life. um and kind of like and yeah, like I guess like I found like I could personally connect to that a lot. And like as for like the more I guess like religious or spiritual side, um that was also really just interesting to read about, like how they like came into their own regarding like their own gender identity, and how going outside of the gender binary can also mean going outside of can also necessarily mean going outside of like what is human as well, which I found was an interesting to read about. And and I think like the comparisons to like not only a spirit but also of God. I didn't like I obviously wasn't like immediately dismissive of it. I really love this memoir, but that can be something that like I guess like may put someone off. And I think like the way they go about that idea throughout the memoir and throughout the like kind of the way they structure it as like a series of letters to these different people close to them in their life was really fascinating to like see unfold throughout like this period of their life, which seems to like really center on like the public around like the publication of I think like their first novel, Freshwater, which seemed to be like what the novel that like really got mentioned throughout.
Yeah, so just for a little bit of background, Awaeke Emezi has written, I think she's under they're under 10. They've written under 10, but definitely I think maybe at least I think as of the time of writing this, maybe they've written a couple books, but they've written more since this because this is let me look at the timeline. I think let me pull it up because I'm right here. They can let's see. So they have the death of Vivek Oakji. Um, they have You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, which is something that came out last year that a lot of people were talking about. So they have I was right. Yeah, it's under 10. It's eight. They have 8 books. Oh, no, that's not 7. They have 7 books, which is kind of what I felt. They have 7, and I've read Pet, which is a young adult novel that they've written. I've heard a lot about You Make the Fool of Beauty with Death of With Your Beauty, which came out last year. And this came out the year before that, 2021. And then they actually released 2 books last year. One of them recently was Bitter, which is kind of like a prequel to the one I read, which is Pet. So I think it's really interesting to read a memoir by a writer. The last one we read, Dammy, was another memoir by a writer, Audre Lorde. So it's interesting, but that one was more linear structured. It was more about their whole life, whereas this one is more about just um their adult life. So this one goes into a lot of detail about like later adolescence and this one goes into a lot more detail about later adolescence and like them in adulthood. Whereas Zammy is I guess in like 3 structures where you have like them as a child, you have Audre Lorde as like as a young adult, and then Audre Lorde later in life. And then so I think that this one is, like I said, it's a lot more lamentative. It's more what's the word? Uh it's like more I don't not it's on like a different level. Like um it's not as uh it's not as plot driven, I guess. It's not as about like the structure of their life. It's more about like at least I got the sense that it was like she talks about like different topics. So like she'll talk about like her sense of community, how they find community, and they'll talk about like their feelings about writing, which I thought were really interesting to hear. Like, so what I was saying is like when you read autobiographies by like celebrities or things, there's not like a section about like how they view their work. That is, so there might be like a section about how they view, like if it's an actor, there'll be a section about acting, or if they're, you know, a musician, there'll be a section about, you know, they'll talk a lot about music. So it's interesting to read a book that's talking by an author that's talking about writing, as opposed to reading a book that's about a different subject. And I think that and then a lot of celebrities, they don't, it's a lot different from the relationship that a lot of celebrities have to their work is a lot different from the way that a lot of writers have a relationship to their work, because a lot of writing is just dependent on you, like you do all the work yourself. Whereas, you know, with an actor or a musician, it's about like a music is pretty similar to writing, but like with at least nowadays it is, but like you have to somebody has to like give you a role in a movie, or somebody has to finance your movie, or somebody has to, you know, give you an acting role. Whereas with um writing, it's a lot very much like you write, you put in the work to do the writing, you you do the you have to take the steps to get to where you want to be at in writing. So I found it very inspirational in that way, where I think that, and I think one thing that um they talk about, I keep saying that because I don't want to mess up their name, but uh I guess I could use their last name because I'm pretty sure it's Emezi, but they Emezi talks about the like their sense of their own work. Like they never like there's a section, particular section where she talks about she going to like this, she went to I think it's either like she was going to like a school for writing, or it was like a writers like uh group, like graduate kind of study. I don't know if it was like a undergraduate or graduate kind of thing, but I don't remember. But it was they were talking about um they were talking about how they personally view their own work, and how they see themselves as um you know, having they have to have like a certain level of confidence within themselves, and that how other people see their confidence as off-putting, or they will be like because they talk about the relationship they had with these other writers in this group that they were in. I don't like Andrew, do you remember um if it was like a writers like group, it was like graduate, or if it was like an undergraduate thing, or if it was like a post study thing?
Yeah, it was their MFA group, and
Okay.
that group was, if I remember, was like really trying to like get them to like stick to one path. Um, after like finding out that they got a book deal, and like we're not and we're race is not the necessarily the best in responding to their like achievements professionally.
Yeah, and I think I think that's reminiscent of like the way that our academic structure is today. Like especially when you have like when you're in the arts, or when you're in like people go to school to get a job, and then so like some people really are, you know, they are focused on getting to the end of that, you know, MFA, or that graduate program, or that undergraduate program. And some people are really focused on like getting a job, and there's pros and cons to like both approaches, but like you are it's really just about what your personal goals are. But like so like the way that the real point of contention is kind of like how they treated her because of that. They treated them because of that, because so the people that they were there with would be like really giving them like the cold shoulder, or you know, they wouldn't they had there were people there that they had community with, but they couldn't have community with the entire place they were in. So one thing I would say is that it was definitely it definitely emphasized community to me, because I think that, when they talk about how important their sense of community was, and that really kind of stood out to me. And I think that that's really, because I think that something I found, kind of recently is, finding people that are into the same things as me and have like kind of the same goals as me, and people that want the kind of same things that I want. And so like, and I think the sad thing is that they thought that they found that with this MFA program, and they kind of found out that, even within something like that, where you would think that everybody's there to like write and everybody's there to eventually get a job, there's a lot of jealousy about in the art space, because people, are constantly compared to each other. They constantly critique each other. I mean, and there's definitely a good aspect of that, to like critique, especially. But I think that like when you have people that get a certain level of acclaim, it can sort of grow like this resentment with the way that students and peers are kind of placed against each other. So that was really interesting to hear about from that perspective. And that it reminded me of some of the things that I had heard about, some of the things that I've read about when I read like actors or other artists, especially like their memoirs, where they talk about, that point in their career where they get like a job, they get like a really special job where they take off, so to speak. um, and so that was really interesting to like, because some people, they never get to where these writers are. Some people never, they, may find out that, commercial space is not really for them. They're more of like a academic when it comes to writing, or they're more of a, you know, they're more of an academic, or they're more of a hobbyist, or they're more of a or they are a professional. And she said they said that they made friends in that space who recognized that they were really serious about the professional, the they were really serious about the work and putting out work and taking their work somewhere and doing something with their work. And there was a really interesting passage in there about um what was that? There was really interesting about comparison to other notable figures in your field. And because Awaeke was sort of saying that they don't necessarily see um other authors is like untouchable. They can kind of see the similarities in themselves with other people that are doing the work. And I think that was really important for me, because I think that a lot of times you read something and you're like, oh, this is like the best thing I've ever read. Like I could never do something like this. And so I think that keeping in mind that you don't have to be that way, that you can look at something and be like, okay, they did this really well. That's kind of what I'm trying to do, and not to see that as like a deterrent, but to see it as like a way to say, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I use this to get where I'm going? And how can I improve my own place through this? Not necessarily to say that like, you know, this is something I need to stop writing, or I need to stop doing what I'm doing right now because I'll never get there. And I'm someone that's really judgmental of my own work. I think I was reading this book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and there's a part in there that says there comes a time in every artist's life where their own ability doesn't meet their own expectations, and that's the hardest that's the hardest hurdle to get past, is allowing yourself to put things out and to be not as good as you want
Allowing
to be.
yourself to suck at what you do.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that I've heard a lot of people talk about. It's something that, they struggle with. It's
I've
like,
been experiencing that even today with
like,
like drawing and stuff.
yeah, like I think especially with art, like I have,
Scrolling through Twitter and stuff like that, and you're just like, what the hell? How are they? And then you find out that they're younger than you. That's the worst part. It's like when they're like 6 to 7 years younger than you, and you're like, fucking hell, they're only in high school and they're already just creaming me. They're just absolutely throwing me in the bin.
but I think also like that's something that is holding us back. Are those thoughts in themselves, because part of getting good is just continuing to do it. And so there's like a certain level of talent that's involved, but like you also have to work within, you just also have to do the work. You have to put the work out there. You have to do the work and let your work find an audience, and to write. Like I've heard a lot of people say that like one thing that they had to get past was just like, finishing things, like actually like finishing things all the way through, and this being like, okay, this is building a portfolio, I guess is a good way to put it.
I should also elaborate that in Australia, creaming something means beating it up, not something else that you could have imagined.
How to,
I thought I'd just nip that in the bud.
Yeah, and I think that I think I'm pretty similar in that like especially before reading that, like I think despite like how much like I was, I guess, like telling myself I just need to like keep on like writing or practicing or whatever, and that's how I'll get better. Like I think like unconsciously I was still like, oh, whatever I'm writing still needs to be the best or the most meaningful thing I can come up with. And so and so that was and so that ended up being kind of, I guess, like this own invisible hurdle that I think that just because like on the surface that I was just like, oh well, I just need to practice that. Like I didn't necessarily think that was like overwhelming me so much. And then like reading like them like reading that, yeah, that Nabokov memoir, and like and like seeing like their classmates like all like think, oh well, I could like well, Nabokov is untouchable, I'll never be able to do that, and like them having like kind of a different mindset in their ability to connect to it, and like how they took that into their own writing was just really made me like reflect on like just, I guess, like just how I treat like my own writing, and like actually, and like actually being able to like get over that hurdle of like not going to something, think needing it to be something that it probably won't be, and also like having that like hold me back because of that. And later they even they later like talk about when they're like giving advice to, I'm forgetting who it was that the letter is addressed to, but like they were kind of talking about like a big takeaway of like all of like their like they're talking about like the publishing industry and all that is to just like is to like bet on yourself more and like stick with your gut more, because that's what they did so much, not only like with I think quitting the MFA program, but also with like taking Freshwater to another publisher that ended up giving them a lot more money. And like that was something that like I also like took a lot of inspiration from, and like also like we got a lot, I guess, got a lot better at like internalizing as I was reading about that. And because of like how much I was also being held back by just like I think like what like doing things because not for a reason outside of just like whatever I want to write or whatever I want to create.
Yeah, I think one thing that they talk about in here is that there's this they I forget who they said it, but there's like a quote where they talk about like you have to disconnect from like care. Like you have to like not just like not care about what other people think of you, but you have to not care what you think about yourself. And so you have to say like you have to like not listen to that part of yourself that's judging your own work. Like you have to, so it's like, yeah, I don't care what other people think about what I'm doing, but I also don't care what I think about what I'm doing. Like I don't care about the like I don't care. I'm not gonna hold myself back from doing this thing, and finishing it and getting to because you have to get to that like first draft. You have to finish at some point if you want to call it's like if you want to be a artist, if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a an actor or I don't know about an actor. Actor's a little different, but you have to like actually do like or a musician, you have to you have to make stuff. You have to put stuff out. You have to like have a product that you do and you can't constantly be like, oh, I don't like that. Oh, I don't I'm just gonna keep this over here forever, or I'm not gonna finish it, or I'm not
You just have to
gonna
you have to just shoot it out, get it out there, um, and also just like say that something is finished or that you're done working on it, like
yeah.
and not
And
keep going back to it and like start a fresh thing as well. Just like,
and it's good because I've always been really judgment. I've always been good about not caring what other people think about me, but I've always had a issue with like getting past my own judgment of myself. So especially when it comes to art that I made or like work that I put out or like I was a lot better. I think at some point it like switched because it used to be I was really confident in my own self. I don't know if confident in myself. I was it used to be that like I really liked the stuff that I was doing and like when especially when it came to like art, I didn't really have any inhibitions. Like it wasn't there was not like any I didn't put pressure on myself, I guess is a better way to say it. To be the best thing or to like have something look the best. I was really, I was like, oh, this stuff I made looks really good. This stuff I'm doing looks really good. And I think because of that I was putting out really good work. And it comes in phases. I think when I'm in a classroom setting, it's a lot easier for me because I have to finish something to turn it in. And then like when I'm not like, I don't and when I don't have to turn something in, I just don't finish it. But that also comes in that also like got in my way in like classes sometimes where like I wouldn't finish stuff just because I felt or I didn't like the way something was, so I wouldn't turn it in or something like that. So like I've always been like really hard on my own expectations about myself. Like, oh, I want to do a graphic novel, but I'm not gonna do a graphic novel because I don't like the way my art looks, or I'm not gonna make a game because I'm not gonna code this thing because I don't like my own I have a thing about my own limitations on the thing. So
putting off a project forever.
yeah. I feel like it's not I'm not we don't have the technology to do what I want to do, so I'm just not gonna do it. That's the reason.
Yeah.
I don't have
Yeah, and it
a
was like,
go ahead.
oh, oh yeah, go. Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, like, yeah, it was this also a small clarification that they made while talking about, but like, I like that they also just outright like clarified like that like it isn't that you just don't feel, I guess, like whatever's that feeling that like holding you back anymore. You still feel it. It's just that you're able to like put it aside and like focus more on like what you actually want to create, because I feel like I don't know, it may necessarily be something simple, but I think like that was kind of, at least for me, like the kind of the piece that the missing piece for me in terms of like how I was thinking about everything, and like kind of like when I was questioning like why like I hold like why I hold myself back so much when it comes to like just the things I create.
Yeah, so like it like that's like that wall where you're like I can't draw because I don't have a tablet, or I'm not gonna I can't do like you kind of have to do what you can and then put out what you've got. Like I don't have, the best pencils in the world, so I can possibly draw right now. Um,
Yeah. I used to be really good at not having that, and just had a very
yeah,
like had a very wise and mature outlook when I was a teenager, and it's all gone. It's like disappeared as I've gotten older. I used to just be like, I don't care if it sucks. I'm getting better. And now I'm 28 and I'm like,
crippling anxiety.
I should be much better than I am now. When's it gonna happen?
Oh yeah, because you're like in
I've
the you're
got
like,
one
oh,
foot,
because you
28, I've got one foot in the grave.
I used to be like, oh, I'm 7. I don't need to like it makes sense that my work looks like this and I'm doing great because I'm 7. And now I'm like, I'm 23. So when am I gonna get good again?
Yeah, it's like, okay, is it gonna happen, or should I have like gone into commerce? Yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping it just, yeah, you just have to be delusional forever. I wish I was just like delusional and really overconfident. You like see people who are just like have way too much confidence, and it's like, I wish I could just be that and just like not even know that everyone's annoyed with me.
Yeah, it's quite the journey to go on, this the journey of creativity. And I just really, I don't know, this is probably one of the best memoirs I've ever read, I think, as far as
Hmm.
like its impact on me personally. I think, but I really like memoirs. I think that um but I think some of them, they don't all impact me the way this one did. Definitely not. So I think that I think I've just never read I've never read somebody talk like the way that they talk. And so in this memoir, and I would I would recommend the audio. I listened to the audio. I think I might also get a physical copy too, just because I think that it would benefit to look at some of the word aid. I think will be really interesting. Um, but like I said, I read the audio. I listened to the audio, and it was it was moving. I mean, um, they talk about, I think, coming from talk about their relationship with their parents, and how they feel about, you know, having that relationship with their parents where they um they recognize the place that their parents were in when they made certain decisions, and they appreciate them for making certain decisions, but they still know that the harm that they caused them. I think I can't imagine, like, even like as a
Mm.
queer person, I know what that's like, but I can't imagine what that would be like as a trans person. And I think that something about the I think that somehow some parents see it as a personal affront to them that a child would decide to be they think that a child is deciding to be trans, that they see it as a personal affront to them, or they see it as a choice,
Yeah,
and that they're choosing to,
yeah.
disrespect their personal wishes for
This
them as a person.
this is
And
so interesting to me to hear people like say stuff like this about their relationship with their parents, because it's like my parents aren't homophobic or queerphobic, but like all of the like barriers people talk about having with their families, I have for being like neuroatypical. Like all of the like, yeah, it's just interesting because I'm
I
like
understand what you're saying.
1 degree separated from being able to like totally empathize with some people. That's like, and they see a lot of the things about me as being choices and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like
and
like
they
it's not
they
something
resent you for
innate.
not they
Yeah,
resent you for not ignoring those aspects of yourself and then
and
like
I
like
think
trudging forward.
I think the hardest part is like the knowledge that you embarrass them, or like, or at least like that like being the way that you are is embarrassing for them and has made everything really hard for them. I think.
Mhm. Because they have certain I think that parents have certain expectations for their children.
Yeah, and
So
it's
to
like
like
having to reconcile that like it's not fair for them to think that, but also, yeah.
you kind of like you it's this dichotomy where you kind of know why they feel that way, but you have to like at some point you have to put your care for how your parents feel on the back burner to focus on your own self, your own mental health and your own um, happiness. And I think that that's something that every child kind of has to come to terms with in their own way. Is like I'm my own person and I have to make my own decisions because at the end of the day, I'm the one that has to live with these decisions. And
Mm,
I'm the only one that's responsible for making myself happy. And I can't I like making my parents happy. If that's not going to make me happy, then I'm the only one I can blame for that. So that I have to, I have to
and,
choose myself sometimes.
and how hard that is when like they're like at every turn trying to convince you that like, because it's like using the same logic as like wanting to eat junk food or something. And it's like, well, you shouldn't do this because it makes you happy. It's not good for you.
And
And
it's
the thing that's not good for you is accepting your own gender, like your gender identity and stuff like that.
and I think it's hardest when there's like a turn, right? Where there's like a point where you feel that something has shifted, like your parents don't see you the same way that they saw you when you were not like out, I guess to say would be the word.
Mm,
But whether no matter what it might be about, like out about the fact that you don't want to do what they don't want you to do, or out about the fact that you out about the fact that you're queer, or out about the fact that you're trans, or out about the fact that you're neurotypical and that you aren't gonna hide that about yourself, and or that you can't hide that about yourself, and that you get to that point and um there's that shift, right, where you had if you had like a really close with relationship with your parents before that, it can be really hard to be on the other side of that and know that your parents don't see you the same way that they saw you before that. And I think that in this day and age there's just so much um focus on like, oh, it's not always that bad, or oh, it's not always, you know, your parents kicking you out, your parents disowning you, or your parents doing this and this and that. And no, that's not always that, and it's not always the same, but it can be it doesn't negate the fact that it does still happen, and it's almost like some people felt like there was too so much support for those kind of people, and now it's kind of shifted in a way where there's not enough anymore because nobody really talks about it. Nobody wants to talk about it anymore. Nobody wants to talk about the sad stuff about people's parents disowning them. So it's like there's not now there's like a reduction because it used to be like you would all the queer people would have resources and they could find resources for that, and now it kind of feels like there's less resources because and nobody's talking about it because we want to talk about being happy so much. and
mm,
and I think that that's also a symptom of like social media where people try to put out the best version of themselves and all of that, and that kind of can be so it was really good to hear her it was really good to hear them talk about their relationship with their parent, their mother especially, and how they were really from the way they describe it, it sounds like they were really close to their mom before they started transitioning. And like there's like it's always the hardest when there's like and acceptance on some level, and you know it's not coming from a place that your parents don't like you or that your parents hate you. And it's almost easier if your parents hate you, because then you're like, okay, I'm not gonna tell this person because I know they're gonna react this way, or I'm not gonna I it I can disregard what this person is how this person feels, because I know that they don't care about me, or that they
Mm.
are. But it's almost harder when you know that your parent cares about you, and that your parent and loves you in their own way, but that they don't they don't see how certain things would make you happy, and they don't understand you in a way that, and maybe they never will understand you in a certain way, and that can be really sad. So, it reminds me of a conversation that that I was having on social media earlier, where because my friend JR has like this hashtag called bisexual men speak, and he posts videos from TikTok about
Yeah, so
bisexual men having,
I saw that thread getting retweeted a few times.
yeah. So it's so like it's interesting to like have like this you I think that on social media especially, there's like this new coming at age of like people talking about their relationships with their parents and their families, and how um things can change, and how they have to like shift differently after they come out in certain ways. And there's definitely a difference between like, I don't know, there's like you can be out online and then having that shift when you might blow up, or people might start seeing it, that outside of your family, and your people outside of your family are reacting to it, and your parents are dealing with, maybe, dealing with their shame about it and things like that. So,
Mm.
um, but I mean, I'm fortunate that, none of my immediate family, or most none of the family that I like talk to very frequently, has any care about my queerness. My family that I'm close to has been really supportive. And I don't really talk to anybody that I think would be less supportive about it. So I'm fortunate that I have that leeway, and I'm also fortunate that I'm not dependent on anybody. So I don't really have a need to. And then I have you know, the wherewithal to be close to, but I have a big family, so I have a lot of support from my immediate family and stuff. But like I said, I can't imagine how it's just really sad that, you know, especially trans people are in this place where, they're kind of like backsliding, and they're kind of like stuck between like a rock and a hard place when it comes to their own, um they're stuck between like a rock and a hard place where they can't be, like, people resent them for being too much in the mainstream, in the mainstream thought, and because they feel like they're like taking over, and then like they can't be too much in the background, because then nobody is caring about their deaths or anything like that. And it's just it's so dire for a lot of them. And when you need this, like, these interventions for your own mental health, and we need interventions for your own happiness, like, even like like I can't imagine like needing something for my health and my mental health and my happiness, and having so many barriers to that thing, like, even beyond like just monetary, right? Where you have like, in some states it's gonna be illegal soon, like in some states, like, and like that's backwards from like where we were, and it's getting worse. Like, you think about like places like the UK or Australia, or places like that, where you have like these these massive counter movements building, where like all these rights are going to be stripped from people, like,
Mm.
and it's not even just trans people. Like, it's gonna, like, right now, like, trans people are kind of
Like,
like the shit
yeah.
mask for
was
that
I
kind of thing,
was
but like it's about like
I
queer
was
people in general and black people
watching
and
watching Mardi Gras with my mum on the television, and because that was on 2 days ago, I think, and I was like trying to explain to her that like there's a lot of people out there who think, because she's like, oh, so what's this? That one's for kids, is it? And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of people out there who think like endorsing or like acknowledging your child saying that they're trans is a form of child abuse. Because like I said before, it's like eating junk food. It's like, oh, you can't just let your kid do whatever they want. The kid's gonna hurt themselves. Like you have to teach them that that thing is unhealthy, and it's like they sort of treat it's extremely disrespectful to the transgender individual that like they're treating the person as like it's like a thing the person wants to do and it's self-destructive, so we need to stop you doing it.
I
And
think
we
it's
need to
also
convince you that it's self-destructive.
I think it's also uh symptomatic of the kind of progress that was that was kind of focused on in a lot of movements. Like you get to this place where like we're so like how it on having civility that we allow the conversation to stop at a certain place where it's not about, you know, them it's not about quashing their feelings about like it's not about getting rid of their bigotry. It's about getting their bigotry to a place where like, oh, you're gonna let that person do whatever they want to because it's their business. And then once and then they start to find places to that is acceptable to exert their bigotry, whether it be like, oh, I'm protecting children, or
Mm,
oh, I'm just asking questions, or it's and then because we haven't really established a foundation of um because we haven't really established a foundation of like queer acceptance, it's it's easy for people to say it's easy for people to fall into the traps of believing or going into um what other people are saying about like protecting children or taking, precautions or just asking
yeah,
questions.
and just the innate like tendency to like trust the person who's being civil, like the like massive prioritization of civility. So you have these people who are like basically smugly stating facts. They're always smugly stating facts or whatever. And like the things they're saying aren't facts, but because they're more calm, so to speak, it's sort of treated like they know what they're talking about. Yeah.
And then the you become the uncivil one. And so you're
Yeah.
like, now you're the problem, even though this person is basically calling into question your humanity. You're the uncivil one because you're having a normal reaction to somebody doing something like that.
Mm.
So
And like because the majority of people can't relate to what you're getting outraged about, like you become crazy. Yeah, it's annoying. It's like a massive uphill freaking battle. But yeah,
and
trying
then
to
people get more upset about being called homophobic or transphobic than they do about the actual thing that they're doing that is homophobic or transphobic.
mm, like yeah, within my family, I'm sort of observed as a bit of an SJW, if that's a term people use anymore. Because I'm just like, oh, this is why people are upset about that. This is why they're getting angry. But yeah. But it's annoying that people
Yeah,
need
there's
oh
oh
you
yeah,
go.
no, I was just gonna say like there's this weird emphasis on the reaction itself and like and no one really seems to want to like do the thinking as to like okay, but what warranted that reaction? What caused
Hmm.
it and like how can we how can we fix that and also like how might like we give the person who is reacting in this way that empathy, and might actually like start to think about, oh yeah, why might that be justified, and everything that kind of like underlies that. There's this like kind of weird just treatment of anger as like, oh, like as, yeah, just kind of like, oh, we need to prioritize like how we react above like the actual problems that we're
Yeah,
facing.
Yeah.
it's like so many people, like at least in my immediate family, they are the type to like only be receptive to information if it's coming from a civil voice. And yeah, it's very frustrating to like have I can imagine like what it's like if you don't have the resources to be civil, people just will not listen.
Yeah.
But
And I think it's interesting to bring it back to Dear Senthuran. It's interesting that um where people can find um similar to also the Vagabonds, where you have like these folk tales and um you have like this superstitions elements and things and spiritualism that people can find refuge in. So like Dear Senthuran, Awaeke talks about how she relates to her own divinity through like I forget what the name of the kind of spirit was, and I didn't write it down. Probably I mean I was listening to it, so I didn't know how to spell it, so I just didn't write it
Yeah,
down.
I
But
think I will probably like pronounce it incorrectly, but I think it's like Ogbanji or something like that. I know it's spelled like
yeah, Obanji.
Ogbanje.
I remember what
Yeah,
it sounds like. I remember because I remember the word from like when I hearing it, but I didn't write it down. It's Obanji, and so she was saying that like that was like a spirit, the kind of spirit that like a troublemaker kind of spirit kind of thing that she was um that she always like kind of related to, and so she kind of sees herself as that. They kind of see themselves as that, and so they say they see that they um and so like they find refuge in that the spirit of like in the concept of that. That's why I kind of related it kind of to religion, so the kind of way that um um Christians see themselves as descended from God or Jesus, and they Awake kind of sees themselves as um descended from this Bungie spirit. And so like kind of reminds me of like it's not really the same, but like like indigenous communities, they would have like different kinds of spirits. Like I don't think I think two spirit is just like a gender. I don't think that it's actually like a kind of spirit, but like um you know or like a kind of being, I guess, in the same way that an Ubunji is a kind of spirit, but it's like they're like these uncolonialized concepts that queer people can relate to. And then if so like the way that queer people can harken back to the history of queerness before sort of like the more evangelical aspect of religion came into play and sort of like wiped that out with colonialism, we can sort of see how there were like these inherent queerness to um, different populations and societies that was kind of wiped out by that. And so it's like I mean, even if we're talking about like like Romans or like Greeks or like Egyptians or you know um uh Aboriginal people or you know Native um indigenous Americans, um you know and then in Nigeria with Yoruba tribes and things like that. Like you have like all these concepts that queer people can relate to, that queer people can see themselves in, and then it's sort of like in a way like it's like wiping that out is kind of seen as like progress, and it's kind of like similar to um what's happening right now, where it's like you had like this sort of progressive thought process and openness around like understanding, and then like with colonialism and um empires and those kind of things, as like those things became more widespread, you had like this concept of like hedonism and like heathens, and like you were believe if you didn't believe exactly in the thing that whoever was colonizing you believed, like it was, you kind of had to like wipe that away. And so I think that, and then so it's I think it's good that um this is like kind of out there, where like you have like, two-spiritness, um which is sort of like an inherent like non-binary sort of concept. And so that like people could read this and see themselves in this. And um it just feels really important to me.
Yeah, for sure. Like I was reading and I was just and like yeah, as I was going and like seeing them kind of like write about the kind of the journey they go on with their entire identity first, like just that entire internal process, and then more of the external too, was just like especially like for anyone who is trying to like go through the process of like trying to figure out what they are themselves, and how like that and how that can, I guess, like how that necessarily like reaches not only again like outside of what's the gender binary and non-binary when it comes to human beings, but also but also like outside of that too, how like how like anyone who again is like trying to like come to terms with and like figure out that aspect of their identity, like can like read something like this and like feel, I guess, like a certain like safety and comfort in reading like someone like really go into the journey of like what that specific process is like. Because like whether it like they were talking about like how like they were trying to like when they were writing Freshwater, how like they couldn't really find any sort of like anything like that book, um, both in the Western and canon and within, I think, like just the Nigerian canon as well, or something like that. But all, and I feel like a lot of that could also apply to like a lot of what they discuss regarding gender identity and everything outside of that with this memoir as well.
Yeah, and I think that having something like this for people to be able to read and putting it on paper is so important, that because you it gives, I don't know, it feels, it was so inspiring to me, like to read that. And like I think it's one of the reasons why this is was so impactful for me. It just felt like it was just really moving. Like I just felt like I just felt really moved by a lot of the it's because it's almost poetic, a lot of the writing is. And they have a really good grasp on like imagery, and you know they have Awaeke has such a good way of conveying emotion in her writing, and you really feel the way that they feel well, the way that they, at least the way that they want you to I think that they want you to feel when you're reading um their work. And I think that that's probably I just remember like listening to it, and I was just in like I was just doing things, and it would just inspire so many thoughts in what I was thinking about. And it's like almost everything I read inspires thoughts in me because I have ADHD. So like I'll go on my thought will go on a bunch of tangents while I'm reading things, and I'll think about, oh, that's kind of interesting. It reminds me of this, or oh, that kind of reminds me of that, or oh, that kind of reminds me of that. But I was just like, as I was reading this, I was just like taking a bunch of notes because I was just like I kept stopping the things I was doing to like write things down because I was just like, wow, it was so impactful to me. That's why I said it reminds me of almost like theory in a way. Like parts of it, like I was saying, are so topical that like it it feels like she's writing it feels like they're writing a uh like almost I don't know what the word is like I feel like I don't- like so like queer theory. Like it feels like they're writing queer theory. Like you like if when you read like like Audre Lorde or like Virginia Woolf or some of like these really prolific or like Langston Hughes or like some of these other like really prolific queer writers that like pioneered like queer thought and like poets or something like someone like that like who like really convey like what it means to be queer and what it means to realize your own queerness. It it felt like that. It felt like I felt like this work needs to be like studied, like it needs to be like taught in school. Like it's so like it was so good and important, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, and like even from an emotional perspective, like to pull another part of it out, like the letter where we finally find out what the name of the who the magician is, that is referenced throughout the memoir, and also
Oh yeah, I forgot about
and
that.
the impact that like that this person had on them, and being able to like convey the full depth of their love and also their heartbreak and disappointment at what the magician has done to them. What like that in particular to me just like um stood out so much, and I just kind of like read that entire and just kind of stunned at like at how they were going about like writing to this person, how they were just conveying all these different emotions for like this person who obviously has played a very significant role in their life for better and worse. um and 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 also just being moved by like you were saying, like just by like not only like seeing like that low point of them, but also like in the letters afterwards, seeing how they were able to move past that with like their other relationships, with like their relationship with themselves, with also with like their also coming to like to view like the house they bought shiny in New Orleans in a new light as well. All of that was like just like told me in so many like different emotion directions, like you like I really love just going on this entire journey.
Yeah, and it felt so inspirational in a way because of the way that the books starts out in such a dark place, and that where we get to in the end is so aspirational. I think that it it just shows how much a difference like little things can make in someone's life. Like how she goes from such a deep place of suicidal ideation at the beginning of the novel, at the beginning of the memoir, to like the place she is now, where I guess she still has like issues with suicidal ideation, but like I mean they have uh they have a support system now, and they have their work is taking them places. And I think that that's such a so emblematic of like what befalls a lot of people is like they they like, I mean, life is hard. It just really is. So I think that this will probably help a lot of people if they were to read it to get themselves out of, you know, if they're like in a slump or something like that. So I think that these two ended up working really together. Like, I don't know, it was like something that was it was like pushing me in some different directions. So I was just like just had this epiphany, like, because we were gonna read like another book about trans identity, but I just replaced it later because I was like, this one was written by a Black author, and that one was written by um that was more of like a historical work. Less It was less personal, and it was more an overview of like trans history. So I have some other books on the list that are more like histories, but this one was, I thought, was really good, and it ended up working really good, I think, with Vagabonds, because I don't really know what kind of vibe Vagabonds is going to have, but it ended up working out really well, I think. So I had a really good time with this. I had a really good time with both of these. I'm I think that, so far a lot of these have been really good. Um, so I'm excited for where we'll go next. I was honestly a little worried about Vagabonds. I was, but I think um, because I had seen some reviews online where some people didn't really, I guess maybe they didn't really get it, but
It
I,
yeah, it was a very unusual line to follow through the book, I think. But
and I think that I guess some people just don't really quite like short story collections. So I guess it really depends on how much you like short story collections, or how much you uh how much you conceptually are able to relate, not, I don't know what relate's the right word, but like get into it. Like, you kind of have to like get into the headspace that they're trying to like get you into, like this sort of like surrealistic,
and
like,
I think like also just the nature of the book is like some of the chapters are gonna be hit better than others. Like
right.
yeah, um
And that kind of is a challenge with, I think, a lot of more like collective works. It's like some things are gonna hit more than other things, and then it's kind of like how you feel about the project overall that like kind of clouds, like, I think the score you give it, or things like that. But and I think, oh, I mean, I don't think I don't think like I overall like, um it's not like the most my like personal preference for like, but I think it was definitely interesting to read. I definitely had a good time with it. Um, like I said, it did take me a minute to get into it, just because of how I read. I think that I just it does always take me a little bit to get into like a short story collections, if it's not like, or like stuff like this where it's like it's not really like a short story collection. It's like a more like what's the word, anthology. Um,
mm.
um, but I think once I got
Al-
into it, I think I really enjoyed it.
Also, I don't know if it's because I'm a baby. There's just also just the element of just accepting the things in the story as fact. Like the fact that this like rain just sort of shows up at someone's house after they it shows up at this dressmaker's place and it's just like, oh yep, that's their child. And you just sort of
Oh
and
yeah,
it's sort of
I just
it's not like said it like the story almost starts in the middle in a lot of ways. It like starts already with rain there. Um, and also like within the chapters it sort of jumps around a lot as well. It's a lot. Yeah, you
Yeah, it's
definitely
definitely
need
like
to
a bold. They
you need
definitely
to
made a
relax your brain a lot and just
Elo
accept where the story's going.
yeah, Eloghosa definitely made a lot of really bold, creative choices with a lot of their stories, and I think that even if I didn't really, even if I wasn't really impacted by some of the stories, I definitely was. I definitely appreciated them for like what she was trying to do with them and things. Once I kind of got it, I think that it's not really something you can just like read through. I think you kind of have to like sometimes you just kind of have to like okay, like once you read it, sometimes you might have to like read it the first time and then or like listen to it one time and then like listen to, okay, I'm gonna read that, then listen to that chapter again. So I didn't really like, but I think also it kind of in some ways I think it would also kind of like easier to like re-listen to certain things because the chapters are so short that it's easy to like go back and say like I'm gonna listen to that one thing again, or like you can be like, oh, I really like that one, and then so you could like write it down and be like, okay, I'm just gonna listen to that one story that I like from this. So I think that's I think that's really interesting. I think that's an interesting concept. So I guess I do like that concept when it comes to like anthologies or vignettes. Is like when you're like you can say like, okay, I like that story a lot. So next I can just go back and read that one story that I like, and I don't have. And I think that's something that would be good for me because I'm not really a person that rereads stuff a lot because I like to spend my time with, like doing like getting into like new stuff more than I like to like go back and reread stuff that I've already read.
I also liked just the end or towards the end of the book where it was sort of like a lightning round and it was sort of like they were preparing for like a big party almost. They were gonna they were gonna inflict a horrific nightmare on all of the homophobes. So and they were like getting ready for their big concert. I thought that was really interesting how like all of the characters started coming back. And I'm like, oh, there's Rain again, the metaphysical child. And
Yeah.
yeah, and like Gold is in the concert in like the crowd somewhere. She just starts chatting with someone. And like I thought I don't know what that trope is called when like a bunch of stories all start coming together. I love that.
Yeah, I
The
don't know. I don't
conver
know
the
the.
convergent element at the end. So it was like almost not an anthology. They all existed in the same
Yeah, so
plane.
it's more like I guess vignette. I guess would be the
Mm,
proper word for it. Like kind of like what's the movie? Pulp Fiction or um some other books do that. Um, that I've read. I've actually this one book. It's like a collection. It's a like a collection of vignettes written by different authors. Like so, there's like two of them. One's called Whiteout, and the other one's called Blackout. I read Whiteout, and so it kind of like that because so it's like one big story, but they're written by like different authors in the story. You don't really, it doesn't tell you like which is who's written what, but like it's kind of like this where like it's um there's a well that one is linear. It's like one story told over a certain period of time, but it's from like different perspectives. And then like obviously Pulp Fiction is by Quentin Tarantino, but that Pulp Fiction is um stories from different perspectives, but it's told that one's told out of order specifically. This one's kind of like this, that one's more like this. Um where like you have a starting point and then you kind of bounce back and forth in time and then you get to an end point and then everything kind of like ties together at the end. So that one's more like this one. Because the other one I was talking about, Whiteout, is a linear story from different perspectives. So it's like one event happens in the city, and then in the span of time in that day, there's one character and then like all their friends. So like you visit their friends in like a linear span of time until you get to the end, and then all the friends meet up at the end. So it's similar in certain ways and different in other ways. But I I think like before this year I had like I don't think I had ever read any stories like that. So it was interesting to um kind of get into that sort of like I guess genre is. And Andrew, did you have any closing thoughts about both the books in general?
Um, I think like yeah, I think um I think for I again, like with Vagabonds, I think like we were talking about earlier, it was definitely, and I'm not saying this in like a bad way at all. It was definitely one that like you guys, I think like I did find myself like having to like go back and like reread some like paragraphs and passages more than I did with your Senthuran. But ultimately, like I'm glad that I was able to do that, and I was able to like really take in each different, I guess, like vignette or short story or whatever you want to call it, and really get into like I guess like the emotion or try to like get into like the themes and like emotional heart of like every single character and relationship that Eloghosa was exploring in the book. Um, and kind of being able to like take in like and get the full impact of it in the same way that or in a similar like in that short amount of time that like I was able to get like uh that like emotional impact from Dear Senthuran and Awaeke Emezi's words.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I think that even though it did, like I said, it did take a little bit for me to get into some stories and like get the concept that of like what she was trying to say. I think that it definitely was worth it, and I definitely really did get a really good experience out of it. But I can kind of see how some people might not want to do that. They might not like want to. And if I wasn't reading it for this, I may not. It may have taken me a lot longer to finish it. Like I may have like stopped and then like came back to it like later on or something like that. But I think that um I'm really glad that I stuck with it. I'm gonna end the live. Well, I'm not. I'm gonna end the recording here. And then I will post that, and then we can.